a little bit here and there, but don't assume I'm reading it. Don't direct chat me because I definitely won't read that. And Alana loves ground rules. I'm trying to create as much as possible a listening and learning environment. So listen to each other. I know the chat is fun, but don't forget to listen to each other, right? And I will say that an open book student sent me these, right? What are they called? Mini glasses?
Yeah.
And we'll try it out today.
Yeah,
I mean, to see if it works. This is not about cutting anybody off, but just keep in mind that there are a lot of voices present and that you have a minute to speak. We'll see if it works, okay? Okay. And this is all in the name of a collective search of truth and Torah. That's it. That's my little spiel before we begin. And I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Whoops. Everyone see that? Nod your head if you do. Yes, you see the right thing. Okay, excellent. Hold on, I've got these little. Gil, is there any way that I don't have to see the names of people who are waiting in the waiting room, because it gets very distracting?
I don't think so, but I'll just try and be on top of it.
Okay, thanks. No worries. Okay, so hopefully this theme will become clear as we look at the opening texts, but I call this a practice of integrating opposites, darkness and light. But it's not only about darkness and light. We'll encounter all kinds of opposites in thinking about Hanukkah and the Joseph story. So first, we're going to read this from Parker Palmer. And it's interesting because when he talks about paradox, he talks about opposites that do not negate each other. So we're going to think about, like, when do we need to hold the opposites as opposites? And when do we want to sort of integrate the two so they start?
Wow, this is a living fucking hell here.
Excuse me, can everyone mute yourselves? If not, we'll mute you. And please, no coarse language here. This is an environment of Torah study. So, Danny, if people don't mute themselves, I'm gonna ask you to mute people.
What is this?
Okay, Danny, please mute people.
I'm working on it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I know you're doing what you can.
What?
Ah, I see. Okay. I'm sorry, we're gonna have to mute everybody. Okay, I'm gonna go on. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna keep the question alive about when the two opposites stay what they are and when do they merge and what happens when they merge in both sort of the themes of Hanukkah and the Joseph story. I hope that's clear. And if not, I hope it will become clear. Okay, so the nature of paradox. Roberta, would you read? Do you feel like reading? This is from Parker Palmer, a great thinker about education and just life in general. Oh, Danny, you need to unmute Roberta. Thank you, Roberta. Here, I'm going to ask.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you for getting my pantomime. The nature of paradox. In a paradox, opposites do not negate each other. They cohere in mysterious unity at the heart of reality. Deeper still, they need each other for health, as my body needs to breathe in as well as breathe out. But in a culture that prefers the ease of either or thinking to the complexities of paradox, we have a hard time holding opposites together. We want light without darkness, the glories of spring and summer without the demands of autumn and winter. and the Faustian bargains we make fail to sustain our lives. When we so fear the dark that we demand light around the clock, there can be only one result: artificial light that is glaring and graceless, and beyond its borders, a darkness that grows ever more terrifying as we try to hold it off. Split off from each other, neither darkness nor light is fit for human habitation. But if we allow the paradox of darkness and light to be, the two will conspire to bring wholeness and health to every living being. Parker Palmer from There Is a Season.
Beautiful, Roberta. And, it's so interesting, as you start to read, and you were reading like slowly and kind of like meditatively, I'm like, oh my God, hurry up. But then, the way you were reading actually really helped me understand it and like helped it land more deeply. So I want to thank you for that.
Me too.
You too. Harley here had the same reaction. So it's interesting how fast we want, or at least I want to go. It's like, okay, come on. But that was beautiful. So thank you. First gift of the morning, besides what Parker Palmer actually said. Okay, so I'm not going to say a lot about that because I feel like he said it all, and I think it's very clear. So I'm going to go on to the next thing, and this is something I just discovered, and I will tell you the truth, I don't completely understand it. So I'm going to rely on some people here to help me understand it. So there's this word, syzygy. Did I say it correctly? Syzygy. Wonderful word, okay? And you'll see in a minute how I just learned it. But it's originally from astronomy, and it means conjunction or opposition, especially of the moon with the sun. The planets, here's an example, used in a sentence. The planets were aligned in syzygy, or a pair of connected or corresponding things. And this is specifically in Jungian analysis. Animus and anima represent a supreme pair of opposites, the syzygy. Now, here's what I received in an email in a group list for my other synagogue, Anshe Chesed or Minyan Ma'at in that synagogue. And a member of the Minyan, Ben Orlov, who's an anthropologist at Columbia University, writes, Hanukkah falls on the new moon when the sun and moon are aligned. So that's today, right? Today's Rosh Chodesh. Close to syzygy, to use the technical term, so their gravitational fields work together to increase the difference between high and low tides. So that's really interesting. So, and as I understand it, so that high tide is at its height and low tide is at the lowest point. So they are more opposed, more different than usual. So we're actually in a moment then where the universe is reflecting, at least planetarily, some of these oppositions. So it's so interesting that Hanukkah comes to bring light into the dark at this moment, right? At this darkest time of year, both in terms of the sun and the moon, which gets darker and darker and darker, and then on the new moon starts getting brighter. Okay, so chat that up if you want to add information there, because I have never come across this term before, syzygy, but it felt like really right for this moment. And I thought that was fascinating, and it also makes me think about, we often talk about reality as socially constructed, which of course it is, but I also think that there's something really mystical about the holidays and how they speak to the arrangement of the planets, not only in our tradition, but in every tradition, right? So there's Kwanzaa and Christmas and other holidays that bring light into the darkness at this moment. Okay, so we're framing things now. We're still framing, and I love this quote from Isaiah, which a student in my adult B mitzvah class actually brought to my attention recently, Ilaria. So thank you, Ilaria. I don't think you're here, but thank you. V'natati lecha otzrot choshech umat munei mistarim. I will give you treasures concealed in the dark, or really treasures of the dark, right? Otzrot choshech, right? And secret hoards. I don't really know exactly what matmunei means. If anyone does, bring it to the chat. Laman teda ki ani Adonai, so that you may know that it is I, the Lord, Hakarei b'shemcha Elohei Yisrael, the God of Israel, who call you by name. So that's really fascinating. So what are these treasures of darkness and secret matmune, something, I don't know about hordes, but maybe, that allow us to know that it is God that calls us by name. Wow, right? So interesting. So I wanted to, again, we're framing things, and I wanted us to think anew about darkness and think about the gifts of darkness. Okay, now, so here's one of my favorite Hanukkah texts. I'm going to look briefly at the chat. Yin and Yang, for sure. I'm glad you love Parker Palmer. Yes. And you know Ben Orlov. Wonderful. Matmun is also from the root hidden. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Done with that. Close this. Okay, so here's one of my favorite Hanukkah texts, and it's sort of like a proto-Hanukkah story, and it's about the first person in the world, Adam Harishon, the first human being, Adam, as in Adam and Eve, and it says, Tanu Rabbanan, so the rabbis taught us in this kind of older text, a Tannaitic text, which is a text that was constructed around the same time or written down around the same time as the Mishnah. Which is 200 AD. Lefi shera'a Adam Harishon. So when the first person in the world saw Yom shemitma'et v'holech, a day that was progressively getting shorter, right? It's like, oh my God, the days are getting darker and darker and darker. Amar, he said, oily. Woe is me, or oi, right? Something I say all the time, oi. Shema bishvil shesarachti olam chashoch ba'adi. So maybe because I sinned, and it's interesting, this word here, shesarachti, I think literally means stink. Asher Chaim is saying yes. So because he stinks personally or sinned, the world is getting darker because of him. In other words, this is his fault. The choser letohu vavo, and the world is returning to the primordial chaos. So it emerged from primordial chaos, and it is returning to primordial chaos because of his sin, right? V'zohi mita sheniknsa alai min hashamayim, and this is the penalty that the heavens have sort of bestowed upon me. That have, what's the right word here? Sorry. This is death that was sentenced upon me from heaven. Okay, so what did he do? So when he figured out that this was all his fault, or so he thought, Amad v'yashav chet yamim, so he stood and sat or settled in 8 days, b'ta'anit, in fasting, u'bitfilah, and prayer. Kevan shira'at tikufat tevet. So when he saw the period of tevet, when the days started, I guess, after the winter solstice, when the days slowly became longer, yom shemarich v'holech, and saw that the day progressively got longer. Amar, he said, min hago shel olamhu. He said, oh, it's the way of the world. It's not because of me, not because of my sin. This is the way the world works. Halach v'asa shmona yamim tovim l'shana ha'acheret. So he established 8 days as holidays from the year before. Asa'an la'elu ve'elu yamim tovim. So in other words, he made 8 days. I think I might have missed the line, but he established 8 days before the winter solstice, and then another 8 days after the winter solstice as holidays. And he made them all as, festive days, and he established them l'shem shamayim, for the sake of the heavens. And remember, this is in Masechet Avodah Zarah, which is the Talmudic tractate, which is all about idolatry. So they established these same days, I don't know what holidays exactly, I guess pagan holidays around this time, were established for idol worship or the worship of the stars. So what I want you to think about here, I'm sure people have reactions to this story, but I want to invite you to think about here is how is this character of Adam Harishon like Joseph? In what ways might they be similar? So let me stop my share and see if there are comments in general. And remember, I have my trusty little minute class, which I'm excited to use. But I don't see any comments yet. We're about to go to Joseph in a moment. Yes, Beth in the room.
I see two parallels with Joseph here.
Okay, so Beth sees two parallels. Oh.
First of all, Adam Harishon seems to think that this is all about him.
Yes.
And Joseph thought everything was all about him.
So both Adam Harishon and Joseph think that the world revolves around them. It's all about them. They're at the center of the story.
And the other parallel that I see is that we have this pair of 8 days. And with Pharaoh's dreams that Joseph interpreted, there was a pair
Of seven.
2 7.
Nice. So
two
there are,
periods
okay,
of
great.
7
So
days.
Beth is saying that there's a pair of 8 days and also Pharaoh's dream. There are 2 dreams, each one about 7. Okay, and then Bob says, similarly, both are self-centered at the start and then go into being able to be community focused. Yeah, so Joseph realized, Adam Harishon, the first Adam, realized that it's not all about him, right? This is the way of the world. And what's really interesting, well, there are a few really interesting things. Because the days are getting shorter, he thinks the world is ending. So he doesn't recognize a pattern, and so he thinks it's the end of things. And sometimes when we don't recognize a pattern, we despair or we get scared. The other thing is that he spends 8 days praying and fasting. And it's interesting when he notices that the days are getting longer, he doesn't say, God rewarded me for my prayer. Instead, his prayer and fasting got him out of the way of his vision, which is fascinating when we think about what is prayer and fasting, right? What's prayer? Do we say like, oh, now God understands that the world is really about me and it's going to give me exactly what I'm asking for? Or does it sort of help us see the world more clearly and reality more clearly for what it is? Okay, any other comments? No. Okay, wow. All right, we're going to plunge into the Joseph story then. Here we go. So there's some things I learned about the Joseph story this time around studying that I never noticed before. With the help, and Asher Chaim's shaking his head, maybe the same thing happened to him. With the help of a video from the Aleph Beta people and Rabbi David Foreman, I gave you the links below, a few really interesting links. And hopefully I can make some of that clear in a minute. So, all right, Asher Chaim, I'm already tired of talking. Can you read? You need to be unmuted. Let me ask you to unmute. Let's see. Ask to unmute. That's not working. There we go.
Free at last. Vayiv boker vatipaim ruho. And in the morning, his ruach, his breath was agitated. Vayishlach vayikra et kol hartumei Misraim v'et kol hachameha. And he sent and summoned all of the Chartumim, the magicians of Misraim, and all of its wise men. Vaysaper par'o lahem et halomo ve'ein potero tam lefar'o.
Okay, so finish translating and I'll say a couple of things.
And Par'o related his dream, singular, but no one could interpret them for Pharaoh.
Great. So first of all, it's Pharaoh's soul or spirit that is kind of what's the word about tipa'em, that is kind of sounding.
Wobbly?
It's not like sounding like a bell.
I think of it as sort of hovering and wobbling, and I don't remember
Really?
what.
Okay. I think we have to look up the word because I remember Vati Pa'em used for bells as ringing, but it's interesting, like something's happening. He's agitated in some way, right? Deeply agitated. And he's calling everybody that he can, and no one can interpret these dreams. And of course, we're back in the land of dreams, which is where we started with Joseph, right? Okay, let's go on.
Sorry.
That's okay, right?
וידבר שר המשקים את פרעה לאמור, את חטאי אני מזכיר היום. The chief butler spoke to Paro, saying, I recall my sins today, or make mention of my sins today. Paro kasaf al avadav, vayiten oti b'mishmar, beit sar ha'tabbachim, oti v'et sar ha'ofim. Paro was angered against his servants and placed me in detention, the house of the sar ha'tabbachim, the chief prefect, me and the chief baker. And we dreamt a dream that night, I and he, ish kefitron halomo halam, each according to the solution of his dream, we dreamt. Vishamitanu na'ar ivri, eved lesar ha'tabbachim, v'nesaper lo, vayiftor lanu et halomotenu, ish kahalomo patar. There with us was a Hebrew na'ar, youngin, servant to the prefect. We told him, and he interpreted for us our dreams. Each one according to his dream, he interpreted. Vayhi, kasher patar lanu kain haya, oti heshiv al kani ve'oto tala. And it was, as he interpreted for us, that's how it happened. I was returned to my position, and he was hanged. Vayishlach Paro vayikra et Yosef. Paro sent and summoned Yosef. Vayiritzuhu min habor. They raced him out of the pit. Vayigalah, vayhalef simlotav, vayavoel Paro. He stopped at the barber shop and stopped at the haberdashers and sauntered in to visit Pharaoh.
Okay, I love that. Thank you for that wonderful translation. So let's just review the Joseph story very briefly. So as you recall, his brothers were very jealous of him. His father favored him. His brothers wanted to kill him. They threw him in a pit, and instead he was sold into slavery, right? He was lifted out of the pit by Midianites and sold into slavery by Ishmaelites. A little confusing there. And then he, in Egypt, and became this very sort of important secondhand man to a man named Potiphar. And Potiphar's wife accused him of seducing her, even though she tried to seduce him, and he said no. And then he was thrown into jail. Okay, so let's notice a couple of things here, which are fascinating. So first of all, he's called a na'ar. He's called a teenager, right, a youth. But he was 17 when he was, right? He was back in the promised land with his father and his family, and 13 years have gone by. So that's bizarre. So he's already 30. He's no Na'ar. So Na'ar, the word Na'ar takes us back to the beginning, as do the dreams. But now look at this. He's not in a bore. He's not in a pit. He is in jail. And that jail is called Beit HaSohar, other places, right? But here it's called a bore. So the story is being repeated and reversing itself. So he's a Na'ar. He's being lifted up from the bore. And remember, he was stripped. And here his clothes are being changed and he's being dressed, right? It's almost like the story's being restored, and it's going to take a long time, but perhaps on its way to healing, lifted out of a pit and restored to dignity.
It's like he's coming out of the end of the tunnel.
It's like he's coming out of the end of the tunnel, something like that. Exactly. Okay, so now let's go on. and see what happens. All right. Oh, and here's something else. So to signify again that the story is perhaps reversing itself, which I'm kind of convinced by, it says here in verse 15, Vayomer Paro el Yosef, and Pharaoh says to Yosef, Chalom chalamti, I have dreamt a dream. Now this is very nuanced, and you probably wouldn't notice this, especially if you don't read Hebrew, but Yosef, when he approaches his brothers with his dream, he says, Chalamti chalom. Here is a dream I have dreamed. And Joseph said, I have dreamed a dream. So the words are reversed. So that's interesting too. Okay, Asher, pick it up, please. Just pick it up from 15 if you can. Are you not able to unmute? Is that what's going on? You know what, Dan, if we could try letting everybody unmute themselves if they want to. If we run into problems again, we can mute people.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
People should be able to unmute now.
Okay, Asher, you ready to read again? I don't think so. It looks like I have to ask people to unmute. And I don't see Asher here.
I think he may
I'm
also have-
unmuting on a different device now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, excellent.
Okay, my screen froze.
Okay.
Vayomer Paro el Yosef, Halom halamti, ufoter ein oto. Vani shamati alecha lemor, tishma halom liftor oto. Paro said to Yosef, a dream I dreamt, and interpreters, there ain't no interpreters for it. And but I have heard about you saying you can listen to a dream to interpret it. Vaya'an Yosef et Paro lemor bil adai. Paro answered Yosef. Yosef answered Paro, saying, "Not me. Elohim ya'aneh et shlom Paro. Elohim will answer to the satisfaction of Paro."
So let's just look at that for a second, because that bil adai, that not me, is so crucial in the development of Joseph, right? Because it was always like, in the beginning, it was like me, me, me. And this also, underlines the parallel between Joseph and the Avodas Zarah story, the story of the first human being, the first Adam, who was basically like, oh, the world's all about me because I sinned, everything's going to darkness, and then understood that this is the way of the world. So Joseph seems to understand here, not me, right? Fascinating that some gift is coming through him from God.
Keep going?
Yeah.
Vaydaber Paro el Yosef, Bahalomi hineni omeid al sfat hayaor. Paro said to Yosef, in my dream, behold, I'm standing at the edge of the Nile. V'hinei min hayaor olot sheva parot, briot basar vifot toar, vatir'ena ba'ahu. And behold, out of the Nile arose 7 cows, healthy of meat and nice to look at, vatir'ena ba'ahu, and they grazed in the grass. Wow, I just got hit by Yefot Toar. Isn't Yosef described as Yefot Toar?
Yes, Joseph and his mother Rachel.
והנה שבע פרות אחרות עולות אחריהן, דלות ורעות תואר מאוד ורעות בשר לא ראיתי כהנה בכל ארץ מצרים לרוע. And behold, 7 other cows coming up after them, scrawny, bad to look at, very bad and very scrawny. I've never seen anything like that in the land of Egypt for bad looking. Vatochalna haparot harakot v'haraot 8 sheva haparot harishonot habriot. But the 7 scrawny bad cows devoured the 7 original healthy cows. Vatavona el qirbena v'lo noda ki ba'u el qirbena umar'ehen ra' kasher batchila v'hikatz. They entered their midst, but you wouldn't know that they'd gone into them because they still looked as bad as they were at the beginning. And I woke up.
ויראה בחלומי, והנה שבע שיבלים עולות בקנה אחד, מלאות וטובות. I saw in my dream, behold, 7 nice sheaves of grain going up on a single cane, full and good. והנה שבע שיבלים צנומות דקות שטופות קדים צומחות אחריהן. And behold, 7 other ears, shriveled, thin, and scorched by the east wind, growing up after them. ותבלענה השיבלים הדקות את 7 השיבלים הקרובות, ואומר אל חרטומים ואין מגיד לי. And the scrawny ears of grain devoured, swallowed the 7 good ears of grain. I spoke to the magicians, but no one can tell me. Vayomer Yosef el Paro, Halom Paro Echad hu, Et asher ha'Elohim oseh higid leParo. Yosef said to Paro, the dream of Paro is unified. What Elohim is planning, Elohim has spoken to Paro.
Okay, we're going to take a little break right here and think about what's going on with these dreams. So fascinating. So in both dreams, there's abundance and deprivation, and they're opposite poles. But in both is one pole threatening to consume and sort of destroy the goodness, right? So the negative pole of deprivation is going to destroy the abundance, so much so that the abundance will be found nowhere once the deprivation consumes the abundance. And it's interesting when Asher Chaim said, Yifat Toar, beauty, isn't that phrase used for Rachel and for Joseph? And I realized, oh my God, this is a book of twos, right? This is Yitzchak and Esav, Rachel and Leah, Joseph.
Rachot in Leah's eyes as well.
Leah, Rakot, nice. Whoa.
That's Rakot with a cuff. That's not
okay,
Rakot
but
with
still,
a cuff.
okay, all right, you're right. Okay, all right, but still. And that here, so there are all these dualities throughout Genesis. And here we see what's the danger of integrating these opposites. The danger is that one's going to consume the other, right? That's, I assume, the fear and the terror. Yes, Beth.
And the thing is that consumption is the way of the world, especially if you think of these beautiful people.
Yeah.
They're all going to get old and wither up and not look so pretty anymore, and then they're going to end up dying.
So Beth says, that's the way of the world. So beauty, you get old, and that beauty is devoured, so to speak, by old age and withering. That's true on a superficial level, I would say. Shot, but not right on a, I hope, a deeper level where beauty of the soul abides.
You keep telling yourself.
I keep telling myself that. Thank you, Harley. Okay, so I see Miriam, Margot, and I saw Daniel's hand before. I don't know if it's still up. Okay, so here, remember, for people who weren't here earlier, someone sent me these and we're trying them out. Okay, the minute glass. Here we go. Miriam.
I just want to respond to the as we age, we get our youth eaten up, but our mitzvot hopefully will not get eaten up. We will become wiser and we will embrace mitzvot more and not allow that darkness. That's the darkness that counts, not the physical appearance, but the nikudah, the light that we have within and without, that will hopefully grow into a ketonet pasamim, a coat of the colors of our lives.
Ketonet pasim, beautiful. And I would also say, I don't know about you, but I find elderly people beautiful all the time. I don't think that being old actually consumes beauty necessarily. Depends what eyes you're looking at. And I also think it has so much to do with like life and death and how you imagine death. Are they polarities or are they not polarities? Right? Okay. We're doing well with this thing here. Okay. Daniel. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to go back to the beginning where Joseph says, "Bilo die, not I." And I'm sorry, Bilodi,
You're right. Biladai, yeah.
Bilodai, that it is Elohim that will interpret the dreams. I think that's one of the most beautiful lines in Torah. I really admire Joseph's capacity to find divinity in his dreams. The other thing about that line is where it's one more reversal, because the divine will help Pharaoh find shalom. And that was what Jacob told Joseph to do, to find the shalom of his bro. Go find the shalom of your brothers. It's one more reversal. And shalom is that integration, the ultimate integration of the light and the dark.
It's a wholeness and healing.
The wholeness and
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Daniel. Paul and then Jay.
Just to point out something else, following up on what Daniel said, really, there's a meta narrative here, which is the Israelites nation will become slaves. And there's a reason for that. God is directing Joseph. Joseph is God's agent in creating the conditions that the Israelites will be allowed to stay in Egypt, and then ultimately will become slaves, then ultimately leaving. So the ultimate light and dark is that Elohim understands that the Israelites need to go through a long period of darkness in order to achieve something greater.
Yeah, that seemingly swallows up the health and the beauty, but ultimately doesn't. Beautiful, Paul. And remember, I don't think we talked about it, that Joseph said, these two dreams are one, right? In Genesis, it's like the book of, difference and dissonance and duality. But Joseph is saying, perhaps there's a greater oneness at play here. Okay, Jay.
Mary Margot raised a question in me, but could you come back to me after Yosef gives his solution?
Yeah, we're about to do that. Okay, no other hands? I'm going to go back to the text. Okay, you guys, very quickly, you spoke already in the room. I can't privilege the room over Zoom. But okay, quick, Harley. I can't.
I mean, I think what Paul said was really interesting. I always have trouble though, I feel badly for the Hebrews that find themselves slaves, that they had to pay for our, freedom. It's okay. They had to spend 200 or 400 years in slavery.
So they were unlucky enough to be born and die in slavery. It's a big picture. So not everyone achieves redemption. And isn't that true for all of us? Right? People who are born in certain periods of history are born and die slaves, or are born, and die in the I mean, this is what happens. So you're right.
Okay.
It's a bigger picture.
Okay.
It's not.
It's too bad for them.
Well, I'm not saying it's just too bad for them. I'm saying it's unfortunate. You're right. For some people, it's an unendingly sad story, and there's no redemption when we look at the arc of history. You're absolutely right. So then we'll have to look for a different source of redemption if that's not it for their individual lives. So that's a different question. Beth.
Going through darkness, in Jungian psychology, we all have to, if we can, come to terms with our shadow selves.
So Beth is saying in Jungian psychology, we'll all have to come to terms with our shadow selves.
And unless we do that, we are never going to fully individuate and be whoever it is that we are ultimately meant to be.
And unless we do that, we're never going to fully individuate or become who we are ultimately meant to be. Thank you. So it's an internal search as well. Yeah, and I don't know if we'll have time, but we have a text that speaks to that exactly. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and look at the interpretation of the dream and then go to Jay. Okay, so where are we? Okay. So Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one. So we did that. Kav Hey, and now we're in Kav Vav. Ashachaim, are you tired? Do you still want to read?
שבع פרות הטובות, 7 שנים הנה, ושבע השבלים הטובות, 7 שנים הנה. חלום אחד הוא. Actually, חלום אחד הוא. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of grain are 7 years. It is a dream. One it is. ושבע הפרות הרכות והרעות העולות אחריהן, שבע שנים הנה, ושבע השיבלים הריקות שדופות הקדים יהיו שבע שני רעב. And the seven cows that are scrawny and bad coming up after them are 7 years, and the 7 ears of grain that are empty and wind blasted will be 7 years of famine. הוא הדבר אשר דיברתי אל פרעה, אשר האלוהים עושה, הראה את פרעה. That's the thing that I spoke about to Paro. What Elohim is doing, he has shown to Paro. הנה שבע שנים באות סבע גדול בכל ארץ מצרים. Behold, 7 years are coming, great abundance throughout the land of Mitzrayim. וקמו שבע שני רעב אחריהן, ונשכח כל הסבע בארץ מצרים, וכילה הרעב את הארץ. And there shall arise 7 years of famine after them, so that the abundance is forgotten throughout the land of Mitzrayim. And the famine will destroy the land. ולא יוודע הסבע בארץ מפני הרעב ההוא אחריכן, כי כבד הוא מאוד. And the abundance will not be known of throughout the land in the face of the famine, that famine after it, because it is very, very heavy. ועל השנות החלום אל פרעה פעמיים, כי נכון הדבר מעם האלוהים, וממהר האלוהים לעשותו. As for the duplication of the dream to Paro twice, it is because it is the matter is established from Elohim, and Elohim is speeding to do it.
Okay, so let's just do, we're going to do one more piece right here in terms of the practical implications of Joseph's interpretation.
Ve'ata, and now, Yere Paro ish navon v'chacham v'shitehu al eretz Mitzrayim. Let Paro look to find a very intelligent, discerning, wise person and appoint him to be set over the land of Mitzrayim. Ya'aseh Paro v'yafped taqidim al haaretz v'himesh et eretz Mitzrayim b'sheva shnei hasava. Let Paro appoint appointees on the land and tax the land at 20% during the 7 years of abundance. ויקבסו את כל אוכל השנים הקרובות הבאות האלה ויסברו בר תחת יד פרעה אוכל בערים ושמרו. Let them gather all of the food of the good years that are coming, these good years, and let them pile up grain under the hand of Paro, food throughout the cities, and guard it. והיה האוכל לפיקדון לארץ, לשבע שני הרעב אשר תהיינה בארץ מצרים, ולא תכרת הארץ ברעב. And let the food be pikadon, guarded for the land, for the 7 years of famine that will happen throughout the land of Mitzrayim, so that the land is not cut off during the famine. ויקרב הדבר בעיני פרעה ובעיני כל עבדיו. The matter seemed good in the eyes of Paro and in the eyes of all of his servants. ויאמר פרעה אל עבדיו, הנמצא כזה איש אשר רוח אלוהים בו. Paro said to his servants, wowza, can you ever find a guy with such spirit of Elohim in him? ויאמר פרעה אל יוסף, אחרי הודיע אלוהים אותך את כל זאת, אין נבון וחכם כמוך. Paro said to Yosef, since Elohim has made known to you all of this stuff, there ain't no smarty pants smarter than you.
All right, so we all know what happens, that Yosef gets to be the guy that is appointed over all Egypt to make this happen. And if we think back in terms of, if we think again in terms of opposites, so what Joseph is suggesting is that when we're in abundance, we don't completely, in a sense, identify with the abundance fully. We put some of it aside, right? We don't partake of all of it. And then in deprivation, we can bring the abundance, so we deprive ourselves a little bit. And then when we're in deprivation, we bring the abundance back in so we can survive. So this is called sustainability, right? You save for the dark times, right? And then you have some so that you can sort of live to the next, you can survive to the next period. Okay, so I'm going to call on Jay and then Jessica.
Yeah, I'm wrestling. It started with Miriam Margot's comment, and I'm still wrestling, and even with this last solution, how do you store? Now we have the technology. Now you've got batteries that you can, like solar energy, you can store the light. There's the Leonard Cohen solution, you create cracks so the light can come in. And then there's the Palmer solution, which is you carry the contradictions with you, the light and the dark together. My problem is the shot of the dream seems to indicate that the darkness totally obliterates the light.
Right.
That they can't coexist. That it just, I'm having a hard time applying the solution to the challenge of light and darkness.
But we'll see that in a minute. We're going to get there in a minute. What's the solution for light and darkness? The answer is Hanukkah. We're going to see that, Jay. But do you want to say more about it?
Looking forward.
Okay. All right. Let me just make sure to leave enough time for that. Okay, Jessica, and then we'll get to what I think is the solution. You'll tell me, Jay, if it resolves it for you. Okay.
You said you had a line the other night. Oh, I'm being terrorized by a small dog. Sorry. You had a line the other night where you said, "Rewrite the night with light."
Yeah, Hanukkah rewrites the night with light.
I love that. Anyway, I was thinking about this line where Joseph says Pharaoh dreamed the dream more than once. He dreamed the dream twice, so that meant it was written. And it occurred to me, and I was thinking about this earlier about recurring dreams and what they mean. And whenever I have an image,
We can hear you, Jessica. Don't worry about it.
What?
We can hear you. Don't worry about the dog.
I know, but it's hard for me to be barked at. I think that there's something whenever I have a dream that, and last night I had an image that's been recurring a lot. I feel like my divine source is trying to tell me something. So it's not so much that it has been written, but this is important. Wake up. If you dream something more than once, I feel like the divine is reaching to we can say the subconscious or the unconscious is reaching up, going.
And that takes us back to what happened to Pharaoh, but to tipa'em rucho, like something sort of sounding on his spirit or his soul, right? Something like the repetitive dream is sort of like knocking. Beautiful. Okay, Tomas.
Can you hear me okay? Was I able to unmute?
Yeah, you're good.
So as a twin, I really heard you about the dualities in all of these passages of the two brothers, the two sisters, all of the twos. And so just thinking about the duality of Pharaoh and Joseph. And, we know this Pharaoh isn't exactly the Pharaoh of Moses, but all pharaohs are one Pharaoh. So there's maybe a secondary duality, but also in terms of dreams and the interpretation of dreams, about which a lot has been said in the last century, it's interesting that the dream comes involuntarily and the interpretation comes with effort. And so in the sense that we all—
consciousness and consciousness.
Yes, consciousness and consciousness, exactly. Excellent parallel. And just so the sense that in that sense, we all are Pharaoh. We all have the unconscious. We all have the involuntary dreaming. And we all have the potential to be Joseph if we make the conscious effort. So there's something about the involuntary and the voluntary, that which happens and that which happens with effort, which is somehow a duality between these two characters, if we consider them that way.
I love that. And also Joseph has started in a sense as an involuntary character, right? Which
True, as a prisoner, right? He lost all agency.
Well, also sharing his dreams in the beginning without real interpretation, right? So he was the involuntary, now he's become the voluntary, where he's moved from unconsciousness to consciousness. So in a sense, he's moved from Pharaoh to being a Hebrew.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, great. I love it, Tomas. Thank you. All right, we're gonna move to Hanukkah now. Jay, can you hold on for a second? No, I'm not. Hold on for a second. Hold on. I'm sorry, we don't have a lot of time, so I just want to get to these opposites and see if they help us. Okay. So Tanu Rabbanan. So we're back to Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis taught mitzvat Hanukkah ner ish uveto. So the commandment, the mitzvah of Hanukkah, ner, a candle that is kindled by a person and their family. V'hamehadrin ner l'chol echad ve'echad. So in other words, the best, the beautifying, the raising up of the mitzvah is that everyone should have a menorah. V'hamehadrin min hamehadrin, and the beautifying of the beautifying, right, the very top. Beit Shammai omrim yom rishon madlik shmona. So the first day, Beit Shammai says, and Beit Shammai is usually the more stringent house of interpretation here. We light 8 candles. Mikan ve'elach pochet v'holech. So the first night we have the most light, and then we go down, go down. Uveit Hillel omrim Yom Rishon Madlik Echat. The first night we light 1 candle. Mikan ve'elach mosif v'holech. And every other night we increase and increase and increase. So it's almost like Beit Shammai, if we're going to line this up with the first Talmudic text, is aligned with the period of time before the days get longer, right? They're getting shorter and shorter, and Beit Hillel is like, oh no, the light's coming back, right? Or the light's growing. But let's think about this in terms of opposites, right? What we do now in Hanukkah, we observe according to Beit Hillel, and at a time when the world is getting darker and darker, both in terms of the sun and the moon, we're saying the light's growing. So we're bringing light into the darkness and we're growing it progressively. It's almost like we're borrowing from the future instead of the past. You know, maybe it's different than Joseph's suggestion, because we're starting with a kind of deprivation and then saying the light's growing and growing and growing, and then the universe follows suit. So it is definitely an integration, but what kind of integration? Okay, so let me stop my share. Jay, I just want to see, does that respond to your point? I just want to check back in with you. No.
It doesn't really address it, and I don't want to monopolize, but it's just, I'm still also stuck in this notion of this idea of vanquishing. It's almost like vanquishing rather than some kind of holding both or coexistence or something.
I don't know that the menorah actually vanquishes the darkness. It brings light into the darkness. But anyway, good question. And some texts I think testify to bring light into the darkness, and some sort of songs talk about, you know, Israeli Hanukkah songs talk about vanquishing the darkness. It's a good question. Marilyn.
Yeah. Hi. Good Shabbos. This was the first year that I was sort of focused on the shamash, and I was just reading what it was saying. You have to take 1 candle, actually not even 1 menorah. You have to take a candle to light. And like in Shabbos, you don't need a shamash, right? You just light the candles. And I was just thinking about that idea that the person needs the lighting itself. One can create 8, and that each day our belief about the light is increasing. Actually, it was even if like, right, we're celebrating that, oh, I believe because it's lasting one more day. Oh, it's lasting one more day. The magic of the one to now one is making two, now one is making six, now one is making seven. So that direction, that our light, our faith is increasing. So
beautiful. I mean, there's such a beautiful teaching about the Hanukkah lights and the shamash. So the shamash specifically serves the other candles, which are not allowed to be put to use in any way. We're not allowed to read by the menorah light, right? We're not allowed to use them for light, but that one shamash sort of is the one that allows all the other candles to be lit, but we can't use the other candles to light each other, right? So they're holy in their essence, and we can't approach them in a utilitarian kind of way. Okay, it is 9:45, and there's at least one more really beautiful text on the page that I suggest you go into. It's a Hasidic text about searching within, like the inner darkness with the Hanukkah light, which speaks to, I think, Beth's point about inner darkness and the task of sort of owning that, or maybe illuminating that with insight. So we talked about so many polarities, dualities today, right? We talked about light and darkness. We talked about abundance and deprivation. We talked about the polarities through Genesis. And, you know, what's the way, and Parker Palmer started talking about, like, you know, can we really hold opposites? And there's something about holding opposites and maybe also integrating opposites appropriately that I think really maintains the holiness of each pole of existence. So I want to bless everybody. Unfortunately, I have to end on time today because I have to do services on Zoom, so please join us. I want to bless each of us with the ability to hold opposites, hold, you know, rest and work and beauty and ugliness, whatever that means, and abundance, deprivation, and light and darkness, and sort of, you know, as much as we can, engage in the practice of integrating them, but even before integrating them, just really holding them and noticing them and seeing each one for its power and holiness in its own essence. So, God willing, I will see you in a few minutes at services. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Urim Sameach. Great to study with you today. Stay warm. Bye.